So hi everyone, and thanks for joining us today. My name is Jason Grillo, and I'm helping coordinate this event for AirMiners. Before we get started, I wanted to share some thoughts on our event and a little bit about the context in which we're meeting today. So Tito and the team and I conceived of this event as a follow-up for our AirMiners conference a few weeks ago, when COVID-19 was the dominant story gripping the news. Today, we are facing challenges of a little bit of a different kind, where acts of injustice have led to social unrest throughout the United States. Myself, I've been struggling with how to come to grips with this, to understand and explain to myself, my family, my children, my loved ones. As Joe Biden mentioned in his speech in Philadelphia recently, the phrase, "I can't breathe," now has resonance, not just for those struggling with coronavirus burden, but for those struggling with the burden of racial injustice. In the context of climate, I've asked myself, will our society in the long term similarly suffocate from pollution we've placed into the air? In that light, actions against climate change can also have a moral impetus, as the impacts of environmental degradation are having an outsized impact on vulnerable communities of color. And, frankly, I'm saying this from a privileged position in the suburb where their downtown stores are not boarded up, and we do not have a curfew. Working within a climate movement that has is largely white. So it's my belief and hope that AirMiners stands for and will stand for inclusion, tolerance, and understanding in the face of the challenges of our day, to where the advancement of racial and climate justice can move hand in hand. And just want to say a few words welcoming you to our event. And with that, I'll hand the floor to Tito for some additional thoughts.
Awesome. Well said, Jason. Great to be working with you on this. And welcome to everybody. I just see we've got 93 people here. We're here to chat about this new development with Stripe. I think a lot of us have read the basics, and one of the, I think, great things about the AirMiners community is it's a group that can get together and talk about this in our own way, and kind of hear behind the scenes, get to know the people that are part of that program. So with that, I wanted to introduce the panel. We have every company represented that's part of the Stripe carbon removal purchase. And I just wanted to go around real quickly and have people introduce themselves. Just a short description of who you are, a sense about your company. And then we can kick it off with questions. We imagine this as kind of a pineapple upside down panel. So if you ever had pineapple upside down cake, it's where instead of me as a moderator coming up with all the questions, it's more flipping it over and saying, actually, let's get the audience and the participants and peers to ask questions. So if you're not familiar with Zoom, over in the chat, there is chat here, and you can just add questions as we go. I'll be watching that throughout the discussion and using that to guide our conversation. So yeah, without further ado, how about let's see, Ryan, could you kick us off with your introduction?
Yeah, thanks Tito, and thanks everyone for joining. Just want to sort of acknowledge how Jason started this off. It's a really intense and tough time, and although there are potentially more, climate is one issue among many, and it's to the extent that it still makes sense to focus on it right now. I appreciate everyone for coming out and joining. It's a long-term problem alongside a lot of other long-term structural problems. But yeah, I'm Ryan on the Stripe side. I help lead our climate team and climate purchases, and I'm really appreciative to all four companies that we purchased from for being here and for the great work that they're doing.
Terrific, glad you're here. Sean, could you say hi?
Hey, I'm Sean Mann. I'm one of the co-founders at Charm Industrial. Charm is working on producing renewable hydrogen, and as sort of a side project, we're also working on the CO2 sequestration.
Awesome. Rob.
Yeah, hi, Rob's fine. Hi, everybody. Rob Niven with CarbonCure. I'm the CEO and founder, and we use carbon dioxide to make concrete to create a lower carbon built environment.
Awesome. Glad you're here. Hey, Tom.
Hey there. Hi, I'm Tom Green. I'm the executive director of Project Vesta. We are a nonprofit with the mission to turn 1 trillion tons of atmospheric carbon dioxide into rock. And we do that by creating green sand beaches, which accelerate the natural process of rock weathering, which captures carbon dioxide. It's been doing that for billions of years already. I'll just make a brief comment. To Ryan, to your point, clearly there's a lot going on at the moment, a lot going on around racial injustice and all of the systems that feed into that. I think the climate crisis is another of those systems. The people who will be impacted by the climate crisis are differentially people of color, both in the US and in the most vulnerable nations. And so I think this is something that is very much, we all need to continue to focus on.
Definitely.
Glad you're here. And Daniel from Climeworks.
Hello, everyone. My name is Daniel. I'm the head of sales at Climeworks. Climeworks is basically building machines which are capturing carbon dioxide from the air. And this carbon dioxide we're handing over to Carbfix. Carbfix is a company from Iceland, and they're pumping it underground where it gets mineralized and stored permanently. That's what we do.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad you're all here. Yeah, thank you, Jason, for kicking off the discussion today. I think it's yeah, the last few days have been pretty crazy in terms of yeah, just seeing so much in the news in terms of racism and police brutality around the United States. You know, protesters taking to the streets. Yeah, like I myself, I'm kind of looking for the words at how these events can better steer and better guide and even nurture what we're doing. I know for myself, I've spent some time thinking about my own identity. Maybe it's something that you've explored, and if not, if you think that your identity isn't necessarily a part of your work, I encourage you to take this opportunity to dig deeper. I know for myself, growing up in Hawaii, on the Big Island of Hawaii, that my identity there is definitely rooted in my work here as as part of the AirMiners community. I often think that with climate, it seems like something that's evenly distributed, right? Well, after all, the atmosphere goes everywhere, but we're already seeing that it doesn't. Climate affects people of color more, marginalized communities more, developing countries more. And I think that unless we make that change, unless I make that change, unless you make that change, it'll continue. And I mean that's why we're all here. We're all here because every day we want to be part of making a positive change in the climate and in the world. So I don't see any questions yet in the Zoom chat, but this sparks a question for me around collaboration. I think that one of the things that is a high point of the AirMiners community is that it's people from around the world who are tuning in. We've got 112 people right now who are collaborating. We've got diverse backgrounds, diverse interests. Our own paths to working on climate are all over the place, and they have so many people have wonderful stories of how and why they got started in this. So as a first question, I wanted to ask about that collaboration. I know that for me, collaborating is sometimes scary. It's usually pretty messy, and many times it doesn't go anywhere. It's not something that you end up talking about or doesn't end up in the news. So yeah, I wanted to turn it over as a question to our our panelists, could you talk about how the role of collaboration has come up in these new initiatives with, again, full awareness that we're not here because these projects have succeeded. We're here because these projects represent collaborations and beginnings, and I think that's the spirit of what we want to focus on today. Is this is a beginning, and there's so much that we can all learn from each other. So yeah, does anybody want to kick us off in terms of sharing a story about collaboration in the creation of your initiative?
I can share if you like, Tito.
Great.
So I'll share a couple of things about collaboration, actually. So one of them is, we're a nonprofit. We view ourselves as an open source project. And we have a belief that because we exist to further the science of enhanced weathering so it can get to the point where it can be globally deployed, that the more voices, the better. And so we have invited any scientist in the field who wants to collaborate with us to get in touch, to give us feedback on our experimental designs, to use the data that we generate through our experiments, to publish papers in peer-reviewed journals. We want this to be as broad as possible in terms of the number of people who get involved, especially in the scientific community, but it's not limited to the scientific community. We even sell little necklaces called Grains of Hope on our website, $25, and the profits from that go directly into funding our experiments. And so that means that anyone can buy one of those and walk around and become an ambassador for us and really tell our story. So that's one thought. The second thought is, of course, the Stripe announcement is in a large part why we're all here on this panel today. And we feel so joyful and supported by the collaboration that we've begun here with Stripe. And what Stripe is doing specifically is making some bets on technologies that are at the fairly early stage. It's easy for people to come along and fund something that's already proven, but the really audacious money, the real investment here that's going to make a difference is trying out new things. And I think everyone on this panel and a lot of other technologies out there have a great shot at making a meaningful difference in reversing climate change. And it's companies like Stripe leading the way, helping us, bringing publicity, forcing other companies to look at this and say, well, Stripe's showing leadership here. Frankly, we're going to look bad if we don't do the same thing. And of course, you saw what happened with Microsoft last year. So the collaboration between either nonprofits or startups that are on the panel and larger companies with financial resources, I think is a really critical element in getting the capital and will deployed to bring these solutions to market.
Awesome. Yeah, well said, Tom. I think you touched on great stuff in terms of collaboration, in terms of trying things and experimenting. I wanted to ask Daniel. We had talked earlier about that way of engaging and collaborating with what's often called the public, or just kind of the people outside of your own employees and whatnot. What's your read on this idea of collaboration in terms of your work at Climeworks?
I do not have such an emotional answer on this question as Tom does, but I try to answer it a bit differently. We have the biggest challenge in front of us humanity ever faced. And we see in this panel, we see a couple of startups. Nothing against startups, but all of us, we need to scale tremendously. And this is a huge challenge we have in front of us. And out there's already so much done which can support us in scaling. I just want to give you an example. About a year ago, I had a meeting with 4 different companies, and they said, "Hey, Climeworks, it's cool. You're doing the job of us." And then I replied to them, probably not, because here we're sitting 5 people and not just us. So we need all of the people supporting with existing technologies, with ideas, with visions, with stripes, with making the first step to get this done. It's not a job of a single one. There is no single bullet to to get this problem solved. And this is why we need everyone. And one is, of course, the corporates, which can do a big step. On the other hand, we also have the community. I mean, community can influence the corporates to do these steps. And therefore, the community is so powerful because they're forming the mass and giving the justification to take the step as Stripe did, and support technologies as we are represented here.
Hey Tito, when I think about collaboration, I think a lot about time, right? And we've spoken a lot about scale and how collaboration is important for scale and validating technologies. But what I think is often overlooked in these kinds of conversation is around like the urgency. Is like how do we scale these up to the hundreds of megatons type scale within 10 years? And I know we've all alluded to this, but this is something that really drives how we think and how I personally think about this is that time value of carbon. Because solving this problem in 20 years is too late. Like, who cares? We really have to be thinking about what can we do in the next 5 years, 10 years, and kind of bringing it back to the topic at hand is I think what Stripe has done is, we all realize $1 million isn't going to change the world, but what they have done is created a new mechanism that drives scale quickly. And hopefully that leads to a lot of others being able to follow their leadership and then to be able to really scale this up. Because I think this is something which impacts time value of our CO2 reductions, because it only supports actual emission reductions. And then that gets right to the heart of the matter, right? So that will directly lead to action and results.
Yeah, well said. I was talking with Sean the other day about kind of this potential scale, because I think what you're touching on is this idea that these projects weren't going to just projects that were really mature, really up and running already. It was a mix of some projects that just started within the last year, or even less than that. And Sean, could you touch on that a bit?
Yeah, I mean, that's a note towards the collaboration with Stripe as well, is that we were pursuing bio-oil as an intermediary product to actually increase the efficiencies of our green hydrogen production process. And when we were looking at that in the context of geological sequestration, that's where we sort of found that interesting collaboration with Stripe to have the ability to ramp up our sequestration efforts, which we had planned for much later down the road. But so that sort of helped us to accelerate a project that otherwise was being pursued for other reasons. And so it's kind of, it's a really exciting opportunity for us to be able to sort of move CHARM more in the direction of sequestration early.
Definitely. So I'm reading through the chat. Lots of questions around scale. Basically, basically to every panelist, this question around understanding, acknowledging, appreciating that where these projects are at today, and kind of wanting to hear more about scale. I think it probably makes sense to ground it in the sense of the Stripe purchase. Like I think for yeah, it'd be good to hear just in terms of your path to achieving that level of carbon removal, which maybe for some of you is like, oh yeah, sure, like it's already done. Maybe for others, it's there's really a pathway there. But yeah, could you just again seeing scale come up over and over again? Could you speak a bit to the scale that Rob had brought up as well? Maybe starting with let's see. I think Tom would have some good stuff to say on that.
Yeah, happy to comment on that. And one of the reasons I got into this project was because I think, probably like all of us do, that there's very little point in capturing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere unless if there isn't a path to, let's say, gigaton scale, right? Humanity emits about 50 gigatons a year. If you don't have a path to gigaton scale, then you're not going to be able to make a significant dent in the problem. So I'll say a couple of things. I'll say a couple of things about this. So, with our project specifically, the way that we think about this is once we have completed this phase of the project, which is a very measured, small-scale research phase, where we need to complete a number of studies to actually investigate scientifically what happens when we deploy this process in the wild, which is again by creating these green sand beaches made of olivine rocks. When we create these beaches, the wave action grinds down the rocks, which triggers a chemical reaction that captures carbon dioxide. So our scale aspirations over the next few years are quite small. But once we finish those experiments, assuming everything is successful, then what we will have created is a blueprint. And that blueprint will be publicly available. And so any government or company following that blueprint will be able to deploy olivine in beaches and coastal shelf seas in order to capture carbon dioxide. So that creates this sort of massively parallel scaling approach where this could happen across thousands upon thousands of sites simultaneously with, dozens and dozens of governments funding it all at the same time. And so given that, we think that the scale curve on this could be very rapid. If we can scale, so that's one part of it. Then the second part of it is, well, what is the fundamental limit? How big can it get? And so we've done research on how much olivine is there out there, how much availability of coastal waters, how much mining equipment, all of the things that we would need in order to, or the world would need in order to make this happen. And those numbers at a high level show you that this could scale ultimately to capture 100% of human emissions. Now, to be clear, that will take some time, but we think we can get to gigaton-ish scale within roughly a decade, that kind of time frame. So that's what we're talking about, getting to that kind of scale within the time frame that we need to act to solve the problem.
All right, gigaton-ish scale. I like this gigaton-ish term.
Heard it here first, Tito.
Let's see. Yeah, we're getting a lot of great questions in terms of scale. Anybody else want to speak on scale directly?
Yeah, I would like to make one comment. I mean, we talk about a massive scale we have in front of us, but here I think I speak for all the companies. We already have a massive scale behind us. When we started 10 years ago, we were capturing a couple of milligrams. Now we're capturing a few thousands of tons per year. So there is already a factor of a billion behind us. And I think for the others the same. So we just need to do the same again, and then we're there.
Wow.
It sounds it's a bit more complicated than it sounds, but I think we're on a good way.
I think when I think about scale and time again, like the question always comes up is who's going to pay for it? Because that, like, the fundamental economics have to be there to drive true scale. Otherwise, it becomes a hypothetical type of academic discussion. So that I know everybody is working on this and has answers to it, but that needs to be a big part of this discussion is how do we create the right business models that take into consideration like availability of capital, like what are the fundamental unit economics. Like these are really, really important things to get right now that go beyond technology, which is only the first step. And that's critical in all this is like we don't have a lot of capital to build out a lot of new infrastructure and assets. And it's like, how do we think about piggybacking on existing industries, existing capabilities and infrastructure so that we can scale faster, but also the capital requirements are a lot more affordable and the unit economics are ones that are profitable.
Yeah,
that's a really good point. Oh yeah, you go, Sean.
Yeah, I would agree with the point from CarbonCure there as well, that the one of the challenges with any of these projects is the basically the project financing aspect of it. And one of the hardest things to match with that is sort of these long-term offtake agreements. And so like we can guarantee that the offtakes will exist for 2 years or so, but for Charm's case at least, we're building plants that have like much longer payback periods that are fairly large infrastructure requirements to be able to hit those sort of next scaling elements. So that is one of the challenges that we see, at least in the industry at this moment, is finding ways to sort of lock down those 10-year, 20-year commitments. Because then once you have those commitments from industry, or even a carbon futures market, if you will, to allow setting a point that can at least limit the lower end of carbon sales in the future.
Great, well said. Yeah.
I was just saying, to that point, this is something we've been thinking a lot about how we can support. And of the 24 projects that applied, one of the things we asked was sort of what was one thing that would supercharge your project's progress. And among sort of early purchasers, almost all projects cited some variant of recurring demand, guaranteed demand, that sort of thing. And that being long-term and recurring is really key to these unit economics. And we recognize that like our initial purchases aren't that, but we are doing this yearly, and we're exploring how we can sort of support projects that way.
Yeah, I think that's one of my favorite aspects of this program is it's a purchase. It's not a grant or giveaway or anything. It's really a purchase. And I realized that somebody mentioned, how might we imagine other corporations coming in and following up with their own purchases. So I wanted to ask the panel, how do you think about this, this idea of doing a program like this as a purchase? Do you have any, thoughts on that or recommendations to somebody that follows in your footsteps? Do you think this is a good model?
Sorry, was that a question to me or to the projects at large?
Yeah, kind of more as the participants, for lack of a better question. Like maybe for Tom, thinking about them as like Tom, for example, you can close your eyes and this would be like, here's this thing, it comes up and it's more of a grant instead of a purchase. Can you speak to the advantages from your perspective as like, what's the difference?
Yeah, and it's really interesting for us because we're a nonprofit primarily funded by philanthropy. By the way, if anybody wants to help us out in that regard, go to our website, projectvesta.org. Thanks. So we're primarily funded by donations, and so this idea of the purchase, this was our first sale, and this is awesome because it's encouraging us, it's helping us to make the transition to becoming an entity that is funded by the market rather than being funded by pure philanthropy. There's no way we can complete our ultimate mission here on philanthropic dollars. And so this is to me exactly the right approach, and I really applaud Stripe for it.
Well said. If anybody else has any comments, hop in. Otherwise, I wanted to move to, we've got a lot of questions around the accounting. Like, so, to me, a lot of the questions at this point have kind of gotten us to, how you became a part of this project and kind of your vision for the future. But leaning more into actually pulling, making this purchase, closing out the invoice, you could say. In terms of measurement, can you speak to your plans for measuring, obviously future purchases and all that sort of stuff, but specifically for this program, what are your technical challenges and plans for measuring this amount of carbon removal?
I can take a start here. I mean, since we're capturing carbon with a machine, we simply have a flow meter, and we're measuring the throughput of carbon. So from this, it's rather simple how much we take out of the air. Second thing is we need to pump it underground and measure it, how much it is basically sequestered. There are this is Carbfix is doing, our partner, and they're working with tracers and basically drill holes underground and take it back and measure the different isotopes, carbon isotopes. So that's the second thing. And the third thing is the accounting of the certificates. It is basically you're selling a service, an invisible service, and you need to take care that you're not selling it twice. So you need to have a proper accounting. There are standards certifying you and taking care of that, like gold standard or things like that. And I think this is also really important because it is a lot about trust, and it is, I would say, too easy to cheat. So you really need to be careful that you're not making a mistake, because if you have lost trust, then it's basically gone. And you need to work on these three levels, and for all these levels are different solutions are available, and then it works.
Yeah, I would say at Charm we have a similar ability to sort of measure the carbon we're sequestering as an element of this project. Both with the bio-oil, we'll be doing elemental analysis to get a breakdown of the exact carbon content of the oil itself, and then ongoing well monitoring as well at our injection sites. And then to the point of tracking as well, that's one thing we're looking at right now. We haven't had really, Stripe is our first customer in this sense, so we're sort of spooling up the infrastructure around how we actually sell those credits and ensure that there's no risk of selling a credit twice or anything like that. And then for our process before it reaches the well, we have a carbon intensity measurement of that, including everything from the agricultural waste that we're using, as well as the energy required in the infrastructure in processing it, and transport, obviously.
To add some more thoughts to this, like I think we also have the benefit of being a technology and sensors and tracking, and I think digital has a big role here. Being able to apply like an IoT or Internet of Things element is that you're able then to add on an element of traceability and verification through creating databases of all the CO2 reductions. And in our case, we have dozens or if not hundreds of plants now. So that's really, really key, is to be able to create that digital piece that complements all the sensor arrays and direct measurement and also carbon offset protocols that are being used. I just want to add one other thing to the purchasing piece and like the procurement side is I think this is one of the absolute keys right now, Tito, is not just purchasing offset credits, but purchasing products. And they go very complementary to one another. And I've personally been putting a lot of effort in recently by working with governments and private sector is to be prioritizing purchases over grants, because that is really what creates like pure sort of market drivers. But if we can bring these types of a Stripe model on top of pure product purchasing, it just elevates the economics that much more so that we can get that scale faster.
I mean, briefly, how we think on the measurement and verification stuff. One thing I'll note for everyone is sort of all the project applications are public, including the applicants of these folks here. There's a section on measurement and verification where we ask projects to describe this in as much detail as they could. Those are all on our GitHub. Please do feel free to go take a look. Apart from that, we made a decision early on to not rely on the sort of traditional ecosystem of verifiers for sort of the verification here, and sort of assume that projects will operate in good faith and will be transparent sort of about their verification and their challenges in doing so. So you can sort of see how these folks and others talk about it in their project applications. We've also asked projects to sort of at the end of the year put together a brief report sort of outlining their progress and challenges to date, which will also be being made public. So to the extent that we can sort of help the ecosystem see what challenges projects have with verification, the state of all of it, that's very much sort of how we're thinking about it. And we have structured it like very explicitly as a purchase for a certain number of tons at a price over a specific time frame. That's sort of how it is in the contract. And obviously sort of we expect that sequestration to happen. But, in the case where these technologies are early and new and challenges come up along the way, we want to do our best to make those public and available for the community to learn from.
Follow-up question for you, Ryan. I know a lot of like these protocols and verification bodies, like it does draw or tax a lot of capital that would normally be going to emission reductions or technology development. Do you see a role for companies like Stripe, who certainly have transformed sort of the financial markets, to play a role in this kind of a transaction and sort of verifying creating that kind of a service? Is that something that you see, whether Stripe or someone else playing a bigger role in driving up efficiencies and driving down transaction costs of this type of space?
Yeah, I think there will always be a balance between sort of how much burden does it make sense to put on projects to prove to buyers that they're legit versus just let them do their work, right? And
Yeah.
I think there is, you know, we tried to strike a certain balance in this application process that could change in the future. You know, the sort of more traditional verifiers, I think, strike a slightly different balance. I think generally we are interested in sort of very concretely helping create a market for real high quality carbon removal, and sort of markers of real high quality. Who gets to decide that? Obviously, you know, we don't know for sure yet. But, you know, to the extent that we can help enable more purchasing of you guys and other projects that we purchase from in the future, we're very much interested in doing so. What exactly the sort of verification mechanism looks like, I think, comes down to sort of finding the right balance sort of per, I think, technology readiness level or something like that, right? And, you know, what you guys can verify and prove out is different than what Vesta can verify and prove out for sort of a given ton, because you're at a different technology readiness level and just like a different stage. And as we explore even funding earlier stage research, that's another thing to consider, is sort of how do we sit as, say, the first customer, and what are the sort of verification bar for being the first customer versus being sort of a larger credit in the future. I mean, one other thing to note on that is we are not claiming that we're carbon neutral based on our purchases from you guys, as sort of you're all aware. This isn't an offset in that sense. This is very much a purchase to try to stimulate the market.
Yeah, well said. And just to sort of add on to that, I mean, the sale of negative emissions that we made to Stripe was not only our first sale; it was the first sale of its kind. It was the first sale in coastal enhanced weathering, and it created now a market for those credits. And so, you know, we want to continue, obviously, to do that and to continue to bring the price down over time.
And to just finally on the verification and sort of trustworthiness point, this is another reason that we've indexed so heavily on the transparency here, be it the project applications, the names of our reviewers, et cetera. We've already seen nonprofits like Carbon Plan start making derivative works and doing further analysis, you know, from the data that projects provided. And to the extent that that continues, and, you know, other companies running purchase processes do similar things, or, you know, more projects are able to be more comfortable and more public with some of this information, we think that's really good for the field and hopefully can support a stronger verification ecosystem in general.
Yeah, that is one of my things about the program that I mention over and over again, is the applications are, like, so much of this is open and transparent. The applications are all on GitHub. If anybody has more questions in terms of scale, in terms of details, in terms of, I think, Rob, you guys put a competitive analysis in yours. Like, I think if you read through the open source applications that are part of the Stripe program, if you read every single one, you would know more about carbon removal than, like, almost anybody on the planet. Like, there's just such good detailed information in there that I encourage you all to check it out. Like, if you don't know how to use GitHub, I think you can, like, it's pretty straightforward. Like, there's PDFs in there, so you just download a PDF and you read it like normal. It's not like code in that sense. But yeah, like, in terms of questions around scale and all that, like, definitely check out the applications. So one question that's come up is more around, I guess, you know, beyond the scope of this purchase. You know, when you think about that, this all can't ride on philanthropic purchases or symbolic purchases. What is the kind of bigger plan for a carbon neutral, carbon negative future? Like, for each of you, you know, where is the tipping point where this becomes something that you mentioned a market? How do you see this happening? Is it driven by a market? Is it driven by a policy? Just how do you individually think about it?
I think we need to differentiate two different things. When we're talking about drawing carbon from the atmosphere and storing it, it's basically cleaning up the atmosphere. And at the end of the day, this is a very difficult business case if there is no regulation. So we need to have a global price on carbon, which is high enough that technologies like ours can develop. I think this is really important. This we need to have, and as soon as possible, and as broad as possible. The second thing is, and this is like Rob from CarbonCure is doing. I mean, you can also generate products with a higher value than traditional products, and there you will have a business case as soon as it is scaled to a certain level. But with this, we can maybe form a circular economy, but not create enough negative emissions. So there, for a certain part, there will be a market, and for the other part, we need to have regulations which really make it possible to scale it to a gigaton level.
Yeah, totally agree with you. I mean, one of the reasons we purchased from CarbonCure is because they're sort of a permanent utilization of CO2, which is, you know, unlike some other CO2 utilizations that are more circular economy shaped, like someone will pay for the CO2 to be used for that thing, but it's also permanently sequestered, and that we think is really cool. In general, they're like, yes, $1 million from a company, even like, you know, dramatically more money from just corporates is like not going to solve this. The extent to which we can sort of help boost the technology readiness sort of in the absence of policy, such that, you know, if and when we get something like a price on carbon, we can deploy things more quickly. We have a better sense of what technologies are able to scale. That's sort of really the impact that we want to have. And yeah, I mean, with the amount of CO2 that has to get moved, I think it's going to be really, really, really hard without any policy.
Mm-hmm. Especially within time frame that matters. So
exactly, yeah.
You know, if I had one wish, you know, after this carbon offset market has been set up now, but if I were to have a wish, I would be looking from a policy perspective at setting government procurement policies. Like if we could actually prioritize purchasing carbon-based products, so products made from CO2, whether that's permanent or non, so it could be fuels or definitely be concrete and other things. So that's would be my number one wish right now. Unfortunately, I'm seeing a lot of jurisdictions that are already taking a lead on this. Hawaii was the first. That both Honolulu and the state of Hawaii have passed policies, and we're seeing it spread across the U.S. and even New York State most recently is a bill, AB 8617. I think that has real transformational impacts, and it's also win-win and can be cost neutral.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'll add, you know, we are existing in this system of capitalism, which I think, you know, has got us to where we are today, and it's you know, at some level got us into this mess. I don't see capitalism going away anytime soon, but I do think that the tools of capitalism can be used to pull the levers to shift the direction in which we go. And I think a real key to that is public opinion. And, you know, I think there's actually some pretty good news on that front. I mean, just to throw one statistic out there, if you surveyed Americans 5 years ago, 25% said that climate change is a crisis. That's gone from 25% to 38% in just 5 years. And so we are approaching a time, and, you know, things that are going on at the moment, of course, you know, may pause that a little bit, but we are approaching a time where the majority of people think that climate change is a crisis, and policy tends to follow public opinion. And so, you know, we view our role, and Daniel said the same thing, we view our role as getting this technology to a place where when the dollars from governments are really starting to be ready to pour into this, that there is a place for them to go. So, you know, in, let's say, 5 years, if we get to a point where governments are saying, how can we throw between, you know, the G20, let's say $1 trillion at this problem, that actually collectively between us and other people working on it, we have a place for that $1 trillion to go that's actually efficient and that can help to solve the problem.
Yeah, well said. Wanted to invite Sean, do you have what's your take on this in terms of, your new product, how are you guys thinking in terms of the balance of policy and kind of pure capitalism?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to talk about it as a pure capitalism argument, because we are a venture capital funded company. Our mission is still to, the mission of CHARM is to reduce global CO2 levels. And so initially we were trying to make char and then sequester char. And so that's actually where CHARM comes from, char farm. So you get CHARM industrial. I mean, the challenge is our sequestration effort is not as effective at putting carbon into the ground as the pump jack operating 100 feet away from it at pulling it out of the ground. And so, I mean, we are all on the leading edge of a curve towards a renewable fuels and renewable energy. But the challenge is operating against a sort of a system currently that incentivizes the removal of carbon from underground stores. So we're trying to close a cycle that started 150 years ago. It wouldn't surprise me if the lag on that is fairly long, but I think that to everyone's point here, the policy really needs to lead this as well. So we're fighting an uphill battle right now, but hopefully the curve will start to level.
I'd love to, since it's directly relevant to this discussion, I'd love to bring in Tito, a question from someone, if I might.
Yeah, go for it.
Gail asked, shouldn't carbon capture technology to innovate so that they make commercial sense in the absence of regulation? If we need regulation to make technology succeed, then doesn't it mean the technology is simply not good enough? So just to take a step back here, the fossil fuel industry has enjoyed enormous subsidies over the years. It's perhaps the most subsidized industry in the history of the planet. And so it's not surprising, given that, and given the experience, given how much experience they have on the scale curve, that it's extremely efficient to extract fossil fuels out of the earth. And then when you layer on top of that the point that the externalities of extracting and burning those fossil fuels are not accounted for in the price of extracting them. So there's a cost to everyone in the world that is not borne by the extractor or the consumer of that fuel. So I don't think what any of us is talking about is some kind of quote unquote unfair advantage. What we're talking about is internalizing the externalities, making sure that the value to the planet of what we do is reflected in the price of what we do, and similarly for any extractive industry.
I think I look at it. I look at it even a bit maybe in a different way. Is like I think there's a lot of momentum right now in the marketplace, and we'll keep doing that, unless we can nudge it in a certain direction. And I don't think that the right way to solve this is say like another industry is doing something that's unfair, so we should have the same unfair advantage. I would rather see fossil fuel industry not get any subsidies and make it a level playing field. But I think there is a role for, like, if we mentioned procurement, is if we're just always used to doing the same thing every day, is like procurement officers never get fired for hiring IBM. Like that kind of mentality is like, we need to nudge people off of the status quo to say like, there is a better way, check it out. Like, we're directing you to do this. And you can set whatever conditions you want, if it's price or quality or what have you, but this helps them sort of self-discover that there's a better way of doing this, that you don't have to compromise. And I think it's up to technology innovators to continually refine their value proposition, the technology, so that you can meet all those requirements without forcing sort of the public to compromise on things. And I think it can certainly be done.
Yeah.
Can you speak more specifically? I just wanted to nudge it a little bit more towards, can you speak specifically to the type of policy work that your teams are doing? Just to help, again, kind of ground it from, hey, this needs to happen, to here's what we're doing about it, or even here's what we've done about it. And that's a question for across the board.
I think there are basically two mechanisms how policy can work. One is punishing the technology you don't want to have, basically putting on taxes on, for example, fossils, and make it more expensive. So closing the price gap. And the other thing is subsidizing new technologies you want to have. Basically, you need to have both mechanisms to balance this out. Also to create a business case. It's not, I wouldn't say that it's not possible without regulation, but it's definitely not fast enough. So with these two mechanisms, you're basically speeding up the scaling. And this is what we need to have.
Yeah, I would say for Charm, from a policy approach, we're looking at what we need to do right now in rulemaking processes, both at the state and federal level, to ensure that our process is covered under those regulatory frameworks, which currently, being a novel sequestration method, isn't. And so that's one thing we're pursuing from a policy angle. So, yeah.
And just to give one tangible example, the federal tax break 45Q that a lot of people are probably familiar with, that specifically includes certain things and by implication excludes other things. And it's frankly very clear that the things that includes are the things that benefit the oil companies. So, you know, there's a lot of work that needs to be done to you know, take these tax breaks that are potentially going to be, you know, helpful and create enough political will and force of public opinion to open those up to forms of carbon capture that are not specifically the forms of carbon capture that only the oil industry uses.
Tito, can I add something?
Great. Sure. Hey, Bill. What's up? Good to see you here. Wow.
Yeah. Related to what both of you just said, obviously it would be great to tax the externalities, but people don't like to do that because fossil fuels are such an important part of society. That's why the governments give such big subsidies, because countries are competitive if they make their fossil fuel cheap for their companies. But one example related to subsidization, which was poo-pooed at first, but which worked, was just for solar panels. You know, Germany led the way, giving great subsidies to drive down the price. That's what you were saying earlier, Daniel. You want to speed it up. And Germany, and then everybody who followed by giving solar panels the subsidy, did speed up the development. So now they're the cheapest form of energy by far. I mean, recently there was a power purchase agreement for 1.38 cents for a gigawatt in the Middle East. 1.38 cents per kilowatt hour. That dwarfs any fossil fuel electricity ever made in history. So now it doesn't need a subsidy anymore, but we accelerated that to happen. And, you know, it took 15 years, but it took 15 years. It might've taken 50 years if there was no inducement. So I think the same thing could happen here. We have to address what Gail was saying, which is, I think it has to stand on its own fast, but having some incentives to help it get there faster, to have the learning curve happen, I think is important, and I hope that happens. Obviously, what you guys are doing is great to help jumpstart that, but we need more of that. But of course, we have to be self-sustaining fast. Otherwise, it will never get to the scale that I think all of us want.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. I think the extent to which we and other purchasers, like, we want to at least even help the world know what the learning rate is right now on these technologies, right? There are so few projects and so few purchasers that, like, as we see this progress over the next couple of years, you know, like, solar has been 2 to 5 times cheaper than everyone forecasted. You know, if it turns out that weathering is going to be that way, if it turns out the DAC is going to be that way, like, we want to know that ASAP and reprioritize appropriately.
Yeah. Well, one thing that happened was, for a while, when the subsidies were big, say from Germany and others, people were complaining that these subsidies were stupid and that they weren't working. And there was one point where the entire market cap of all the solar companies, like $100 billion market cap of all the solar companies, was exactly equal to all the subsidies that had been given. So everybody was almost trying to give up and say that's stupid. But then just a few years later, the subsidies were pulled back, and then it was self-sustaining. So hopefully people won't lose patience, that we last just long enough to help drive that price down. But thank you guys for leading the way. It's really, really important.
Yeah, that's very well said. I appreciate that point. And maybe something I can add on to it. You know, I think one thing that can really help us all is answering the question of what are the other benefits of what we do, right? So for some of the companies here, there is a tangible product that's produced that can be sold for a profit. Awesome. You know, for us, we create these green sand beaches, which can have some other interesting co-benefits. One of them is reducing ocean acidification. As I'm sure everyone here knows, OA is a major problem. It's been causing Dungeness crabs to dissolve, all sorts of other problems, coral growth, etc. By actually creating a green sand beach, we reduce ocean acidification in the local ecosystem, which of course can help local fisheries, local shellfish yields, all of these things. So to the extent that there's another thing we can all point to that says, there's this other thing, so, you know, and especially if it's something that connects with people emotionally, then I think that can help to get us a longer stay of execution. Bill, on your point, like we want to make sure people don't lose patience, right? And so we want to give them reasons to believe.
Yeah, well said. I'm so glad you hopped in, Bill. Great stuff. I'm seeing lots in the chat, in our Slack, and everybody's like double thumbs up. So it's 12:55. We're kind of wrapping up here. It'd be good to get some final thoughts from everybody. But if people do want to stick around, we're going to be ending in 5 minutes. But Zoom makes it really easy to do breakout rooms. So we're thinking we could just kind of like match people up with 3 or 4 other random people. You could have a chat. Just seeing the names pop up. There's incredible people here. Didn't expect Bill Gross to pop up. That was great. So just like, keep your mind open to the incredible stuff that can happen. So stick around for the breakout rooms if you got time. But yeah, back to all the. I'm hesitant to call everybody panelists. I realize it's in this event you're panelists, but back to the entrepreneurs, to the innovators, to the participants in this Stripe program. Any final words for other people that are, asking incredible questions? These are people that are interested in starting their own companies. These are people that were applicants to the Stripe program themselves. By the way, all the applications are open source. When I mentioned that before, it's not just the 4 final ones. It's everybody's applications are open source on that GitHub link. I love it. But yeah, back to all of you. Any closing thoughts on this for the 117 people that we have here at the moment? Tom, how about you? Let's start with you.
No, thanks, Tito. Well, thank you. Thanks for hosting. Thank you to Ryan and Stripe, and thanks everyone for joining. This has been great. I'll definitely stick around for a few minutes afterwards. I'll just close out by saying we are really excited about the potential to capture carbon dioxide in the tens of gigatons, ultimately at less than $10 a ton. We believe we can get there. We do need your help. So if you want to help us out in some way, either by making a donation, if you're a potential scientific collaborator, if you have access, if you have contacts with people who have awesome private beaches that could be a good site for us. Like, there are a lot of different things we need. So projectvesta.org, I'll put the website in the chat, and we'd love to hear from you. So thanks, everyone.
I'll close with, and I can stick around for a few minutes as well, but like, this is like, Stripe is not going to solve this problem. The projects are going to solve this problem, right? Like, people working on actual technology to do actual sequestration are the ones who are going to solve this problem. And there are not nearly enough companies, regardless of how exciting any individual company is, there's like not nearly enough companies, there's not nearly enough founders, there's not nearly enough variety of founders working on these problems. And we're going to do our best to help create a market for you all. But like, if you're thinking about starting a carbon removal company or have a novel technology or have an interesting approach, like, please do so. We need so many more founders working on this stuff.
Well said.
I will close out by saying that this project for us has been sort of rapidly evolving over the last few weeks and months. So we do owe this community specifically a white paper that gives a little more detail than our Stripe application, and so that is in work. I know there's a lot of scientists present here, and so we do want to share our research and where we are right now. So that'll be up on our website, which is charmindustrial.com. And we also have an FAQ there as well if there's anything specific that you're looking for from our project that I may not have gotten to either here or in our Stripe application. And then I'm also happy to stay on the line for a little bit afterwards.
Nice. Daniel.
Yeah, I would like to say thank you to Stripe. I would like to say thank you to all the other applicants to be part of this journey, to the community, and it's really great to be part of this family. Thanks a lot.
Beautiful. Rob.
Along the same lines, thank you so much for bringing higher visibility into this issue. And for everyone who joined us here today, it's really, really important because it affects everything, whether it be policy or market or motivating other tech entrepreneurs to start their companies. I think creating a community is really, really important, and it's been missing until really recently.
Beautiful. Well said, everybody. As a person who was definitely tuned into the comments in the chat, I can also say thank you to all the people that were chatting. I think that's something that we really aspire to in the AirMiners community is we're all peers. It's, you know, one of the reasons we don't use Zoom webinar where it's, you know, only the speakers can speak kind of thing is because then people like Bill Gross can't pop in, right? I mean, you would totally miss that if you had this more structured, regimented type thing. This is a community. This is fundamentally the people that are speaking here today are on the same level as the people that are asking questions in the chat, the people that you meet in Slack. I think that is, I think that's incredible, and I love it. And if you want to join the AirMiners community, if you're not already a member, please check out airminers.org, and there's a button to join the Slack community. If you're part of the AirMiners conference, by the way, and you're just a single channel guest, I just recently discovered there's a bug in it, so I need to manually add everybody in case you've been wondering why you're still stuck in that single channel. But yeah, again, thanks everybody. Your questions and presence and seeing everybody really, to me, help prove out this model that having this kind of peer, like we're all in this together feel is really something that we want to keep going forward. Incredible thanks to our panelists and technology leaders, and incredible gratitude to Jason, Coulter, and Yante who helped pull this all together. And I'm going to hand back to Jason. Yeah, thanks, Tito. Really appreciate all the work that you put in, and thank you too to the panelists for your insights and sentiments today. As a plug for future, in a few weeks, we're going to have another similar discussion, this time from a more technical academic perspective. We're still working on getting the speaker confirmed, but keep your eyes peeled for future announcement coming soon. And we will leave it at that. Please do feel free to stick around and do the breakout rooms. We'll keep it. I'll stop the recording, and we will keep the Zoom chat itself going for another 15 minutes or so. So thanks, everyone, and hope to see you, hear from you soon.